Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Awesome Wholesaler Experience podcast, where we look into the many facets of the job, the career, and the lifestyle, easy for me to say, of investment and insurance product wholesaling. I'm your host, the creator of the Awesome Wholesaler Experience, and yours truly, Awesome Mike. Hey, everyone, thanks for tuning in today. And on the show today, we have a very special guest, as they all are, clearly. But today's guest is none other than Mary Ann Doggett. Now, let me introduce you to her a little bit. Many of you probably know her, but just in case. For the past 25 years, Mary Ann has been not only the co-founder, but the managing partner of a company called Interactive Communications, which helps financial services firms improve their distribution capabilities and the effectiveness of their sales organizations. My brothers and sisters, yes, she works for or with wholesalers and their team. So get out your notepad and pen and get ready to take some notes. Today is going to be a value-packed episode. Mary Ann is internationally recognized, and she's a highly sought-after keynote speaker and the author of one of my favorite publications, The Quick and Essential Wholesaler Handbook. Now, before starting all of this wholesaler goodness, she actually had a stellar career for a little company called Citigroup. You might have heard of that company, where she was the business director of Citibank's sales call center, responsible for selling banking via the telephone. Imagine that. Prior to that, she was the director of sales for the New York Metro Region Retail Banking Division, where she was responsible for, get this, the development of a sales culture for their 234 branches. Mary Ann, thanks for taking the time to come on the show today. Welcome. How are you?
I am good. What an intro. I'm tired listening to it.
Oh, you definitely deserve it. It's hard to believe you've done all that before your 30th birthday, so congratulations.
Thank you for mentioning that. Yes.
Yeah, terrific. One thing I want to talk about, though, and mention, for the past several years, you've actually provided some marketing support for a nonprofit called Dogs for the Deaf. And Dogs for the Deaf, they help the hearing impaired or the deaf with service dogs in their homes. And can you tell us about that? And if everyone doesn't know, you actually are a member of that society. So tell us about your work with the Dogs for the Deaf and what their mission is.
Actually, I am deaf myself. And if you noticed in the background a door moving, that was a dog for the deaf that's been roaming in and out of my house here. And his name is Riley. Yes, since birth, my hearing has gotten progressively worse. And so in the last, maybe the last 15-ish years, I've been totally deaf. And so I got involved there. I had a little problem when I was traveling around. If there was a fire alarm or smoke alarm or something in the middle of the night when I didn't have my high-powered bionic hearing aids in, I was a little nervous. Well, people were more nervous than I was, actually, because I couldn't hear anything. But these dogs, what they do is they're trained to alert you for things like those, the fire alarms and the dangerous stuff. He's jumping around now. It's amazing that you introduced this out. You can hear him. So that's what I believe in this organization. It took me 3 years to get a dog. That's how long the wait was. They flew him in from Seattle. And it's kind of like an online dating service. They show you dogs, to choose from. And as soon as I saw this scoundrel, I said, yeah, that's the one. They're all rescued. So, I just think it's an amazing service for folks that can hear. And so I just wanted to really help them out and perpetuate what they do.
That was a kind of a multi-purpose comment that I made, and one is to expose folks to the service or to the company or the nonprofit, I should say, but also too is to demonstrate how incredibly successful that you've been, even with this little bit of a, call it a challenge in your life, especially with the your maybe forte being phone sales. It's quite remarkable. So congratulations. I'm really looking forward to digging into that. As a child growing up, you grew up, I guess you grew up in New Jersey. Would that be right?
I did, Jersey
Yeah.
girl.
Grew up in New Jersey, which is, almost as difficult as growing up in Detroit as I did. But anyways, did you have some particular role models or mentors, maybe a parent or an uncle or aunt that kind of inspired you to reach the heights in business and in life that you have?
That's an interesting question that no one has ever asked me. And I will say no. In the specific sense of business, but my role model was really my dad, who was an FBI agent. So he was not in business, but I guess it was his work ethic and also his belief in me that I could do anything. And he used to tell me that I had incredible patience, and that was mostly because I couldn't hear anything and I was trying to like figure things out. But yeah, that's I would say where it came from. I got into banking quite by a mentor of mine who had just said, "Come to Citibank." And I'm not a banker, nor will I ever be a banker. And I'm just seeing something on the screen. Is your screen okay? I just want to make sure because it says my internet is unstable. Well,
Yeah,
I was
no
glad
worries.
that it say you're unstable because I would have gone like this. Um,
That's
so
obvious.
I got into banking, and Citigroup at the time was the kind of organization that basically said, "I'm going to give you a job bigger than you can deal with, and we'll see whether you can deal with that." And so that was sort of how every job I got, I said, "Oh my God, I'm not quite sure how to do this," but they were forgiving. And in the case of myself, I got to a very high level in the organization without, with a lot of mistakes along the way. So, and that's where I kind of got into the phone business. The last job I had there was running the phone center for Citigroup. And I just fell in love with people who work on the phones. And I know how difficult a job it is. And I also know how much fun it can be. So that sort of started that started the phone thing. And then I left Citigroup, got out, an amazing opportunity to do some consulting for Fidelity. And again, I'd say I sort of fell into that. I must be falling a lot. I don't know, but I had a guy that worked for me, and then I kind of mentored, and he went on to Fidelity, and that's sort of how I got that job there. Built their sales process, and to this day, I'm not going to take. I'll take a tiny bit of credit for it, but to this day, it endures, and that's sort of my signature. I say, how do I know I'm successful? And it really is. Somebody calls me at Christmas time and goes, "I'm still using your stuff 10 years later." So that was sort of the gig.
Well, congratulations. I'm sure that detective or lieutenant or agent Doggett is very proud of you, and I'm glad that we're able to continue to benefit from his inspiration to his daughter. Growing up and going to college and then getting a corporate job, that's pretty standard operating procedures, I think, for business people today. And I even read one of your quotes. I've knocked on doors, sold over the phone, and managed corporate sales businesses, so I understand the art and the science of selling. My experience and tenure in the asset management industry provides clients with latest trends and best practices, and most importantly, what not to do.
Mhm.
So you've built a business, I guess, a reputation in that regard. But I have to ask you, you were doing so well. You've got some major Fortune 100 companies on your resume, Citigroup, Fidelity. But it seems like about 25 years ago, you told them all to buzz off. You're starting your own thing. How did that happen?
Well, the answer to that question is I reached a point at Citigroup where I said, you know what? The way up isn't a way I want to keep going. And I guess other people do reach that in corporate America, but I was driving under the 59th Street Bridge one day, going to their office in Long Island City, and I just said, nah, no more. And so fortunately, I was able to get a package from them, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I'm a skier. And it was winter. So I said, well, maybe I should just ski on this for a while. And I did that. And that is actually, while I was out just trying to figure out what I wanted to do, was when I got the call from the guy at Fidelity that said, can you come on in and do this? And I said, well, I don't really know how to do consulting, but I could give it my best shot. So anyway, when you have a break like that early on in your consulting career, it's a very big deal, because the Fidelities, people in this side of the business, there's the banking side and then there's the asset management side, and people on the asset management side don't let's say there's a little hierarchy in how people feel about each side of that, if that makes sense. So anyway, I didn't know that much about the internal wholesaling business. I didn't even, and I had to learn very quickly. So I loved it. I loved not having to go back to the same place every night. And so that was just sort of the start. And I never looked back.
Yeah, that's exciting. And you've written a lot. I mean, a lot. I spent a lot of time reading your content about the the do's and like you mentioned, maybe sometimes more importantly, the what not to do's for wholesalers. And we want to talk about a couple of them in particular. In fact, I'll just jump right in. You mentioned here that top wholesalers, they know that the product is actually a distraction.
Yeah.
And I'll read quickly. You say, once you separate yourself from the value add implementation, you actually miss the chance to be one of the go-to wholesalers that advisors do most of their business with. If you send an email with an attachment to a value add program, the advisor thanks you and you wait and wait and wait. As soon as you attach that PDF to that email, you are toast. Tell us, how does a wholesaler survive if the very product that they're selling is actually a distraction?
I think it's very difficult is the simple answer to that, and so much more difficult than it used to be. And we all know with the internet and information and all that stuff that advisors can access what used to be the signature that got you into an office and kept you there, which was the fact sheet a long time ago. So, but in terms of product being the distraction, I think the issue right now is that as much as you might understand that conceptually, it's very difficult to have that, to I guess, feel the accountability that needs to be there that says, will you buy from me, both in the good times and the bad times? And I think the stats that I'm reading, where top, especially RIAs now, are only dealing with 3 or 4 wholesalers. That's the gig. And so it can't be, they're not revolving through them because of product. And that's where the product has become commoditized, and you can get it in a lot of different places. But where you do need the help, you're going to handpick, 3 to 5 people. And those are going to be your go-to guys. And that has to be a lot more than a good ETF.
Yeah. You've seen the inside wholesaler, and I guess outside or external wholesalers, you've seen it develop over the last couple of decades. And, what do you see as the kind of the bedrock of the business? Like what do you have to have in order to survive the next 2 decades?
You have to want to keep learning. You really have to want to keep learning, and you have to, everybody says be a student of the business, absolutely, but not be afraid of change and recognize that selling has changed. I think that one of the most exciting things about how sales has changed is the whole psychological element of it that you have to bring in as part of the sales process now. And what that means is it's kind of nice the product is a distraction because you can't lead with product, and you need in terms of the bedrock right now, you need a different level of sales skills to do a couple of things, but one in particular is to capture and keep people's attention when everybody has the attention span of a gnat. I love sitting here talking to you because you're really paying attention to me because you have to. But, in front of an advisor, the wholesaler doesn't necessarily have that luxury. And so a lot of the things that we teach now are, how do you connect at that psychological level in a very quick manner that doesn't have anything to do with what used to be rapport? And so what I mean by that is, how are the kids and the weather and all that stuff that people in the past led to believe, in addition to your product, that's what keeps the relationship strong. And there's just so many wholesalers that have strong relationships, and yet suddenly they weren't getting the same business from these guys. And so because it was a lot of personal rapport that was being relied upon, as opposed to a higher level of skill combined with what they brought to the table, if that makes sense.
Sure. And what kind of skill, are you talking about?
Yeah. I think that one of them, I'm a big believer, because of my communication challenges, that every word counts. And so neurolinguistics is an area that I've gotten particularly fond of in terms of the way people like to hear words. So the way you open a conversation would have something that I call business rapport, which is sameness, likeness, agreement. So you would open the conversation with something that both you and the advisor know to be true. I call that the yes, yes, yes skill. But in any event, I won't go into detail on it unless you want me to. But what it does is it connects, people go, okay, I'm ready to listen. And the amazing thing about it is it doesn't have anything to do with weather.
What does it have to do with?
Oh, there you go. Okay. You were stuck on something there. I was looking at you. It has to do with, basically there's patterns that people have. And so some people are, you'll maybe notice that some people are very charismatic, and we call them toward, TOWARD, move toward things. They like opportunities. There's another group of people that are problem solvers. So those are two sides of the same pattern. And about 40% of the population are problem solvers, and about 40% of the population are opportunity seekers. And then there's some folks in the middle that can go both ways. But the implication of that is, if you are talking to an advisor and he happens to be a problem solver, and you happen to be, your preference, an opportunity person, in your head, that advisor is going to be having this chatter that says, why is he talking about opportunities? Why does he keep using that word? And so it's small things like that. So what you have to do as a wholesaler is you have to sprinkle into your conversation. I'm not asking you to diagnose the person. That's what a lot of these psychological things do. I got to know exactly whether they're a driver, whether they're, amiable. But what I teach is being able to use words that will appeal to all sides of the pattern and not cause that chatter, if that makes sense.
Sure. Can you give us one or two of these magic words, or these words that can appeal to all sides?
Actually, my very favorite is, and you have to use these exact words, but if you are working with a client and there are a group of people that want to decide for themselves, right? And they're called internal people. And there are a group of people that they want research, they want proof. They read the consumer reports, and those are the people that actually, that's the dog scratching. Did you hear that? That actually, look at the back of Crest toothpaste where it says recommended by the American Dental Association. So if you are a person that decides internally, like I am, I'm like psychologically flawed. I'm so internal. But if you're one of those people, you look at that and you go, yeah, so what? And other people, they have, they look at that and they say that's one of the things that I look for. Neither one is bad, but what you would say at the end of a conversation would be, only you can decide whether what we've talked about makes sense. Okay, so that's for those people that want to decide for themselves, and that makes their hair on the back of their neck go down and go, okay. And many other advisors like you have found this solution to be particularly helpful. So that's the social proof. Okay, they want to know what other people are doing, and it's not disingenuous. You're just saying it in a way that allows that guy to go, got it, and that guy to go, huh, got it.
Wholesalers, you're welcome. There was a 50 caliber silver bullet just given to you, and I'll kind of paraphrase it again as I was scratching my notes down. But only you can decide, Marianne, if what we've talked about really makes sense and is appropriate for your client base. And I'll also add that many other advisors are currently using this strategy, so you would be in good company if you decide that it is something you want to implement. Something to that effect?
Absolutely. So it's a little bit of social proof, it's a lot of the psychological concepts, but in a little sentence there, it's a very big deal. But another one you could use is for people that are procedural. People go, oh, these are closing techniques. They're techniques that you can use to cause the advisor to feel comfortable in telling you what they really think is the bottom line. I don't believe you can ever make anybody buy something with techniques. Your job as a wholesaler is to make the guy across the desk comfortable so that they can tell you the real deal. And that's all you want to know.
Now, coming from somebody raised in New Jersey and active in New England, that's kind of touchy-feely. I thought you'd be more of you will buy, or you will die. I'm kidding.
I'm from New Jersey. I went to school in the University of Vermont. I had to change my license plates.
That's awesome. That's hilarious. Hey, let's keep on with that. I'm going to come back to another question I had, but one of my favorite articles that you've written, and maybe it's an excerpt from something else you've written too, but where I found it basically was titled, "Here are some of the former or used to be best practices that are actually now becoming worst practices." And this not only demonstrates, your savvy, but also the evolution of our business. And I've only picked a few of them here, but allow me to kind of read into them. First one, an internal wholesaler doing an intro call. Hi, I'm calling to introduce myself as your new wholesaler. That's a worst practice now, you're saying. Scheduling calls. Hi, this is internal wholesaler, and I want to let you know that external wholesaler will be in your area and would like to set up some time to talk. Bad. Using the phrase, if I could show you how your fund, the one that you're using stinks and the one that I have is better, or that you're wrong, not good. Now, here's where it gets tricky, though. A follow-up call from a wholesaler meeting. I know my partner Dave was out to see you and you were interested in fill in the blank. Do you have any questions? That's actually a worse practice now. Thank you for sales call, you're saying is a bad thing now. Hey, Marianne, I saw you dropped a ticket in our fund and I wanted to say thanks. That used to be really positive. That's now negative. Tell me about those differences now. And basically you're saying that what used to work could actually be harmful now.
Yeah, well, I think that it's not because those things are bad. It's just that nobody has time anymore, and so you're much more discerning about what and who takes up your time, and so every interaction has to be valuable. And what used to be a kind of nice, oh, thank you for your business. You talk to advisors and everybody gets thanked for their business. They do, they do, they do. And I know you appreciate it, but it's a throwaway interaction if that's all you're doing. And so what we teach is, if you can thank them, but you need to start with, I'm calling for two reasons. First, to thank you for your business, but second, because we have something based on the research I've done about you, looks like it might be something that could be helpful. I'm not sure though, because I need to ask you a couple of questions to understand exactly what you're focused on to see whether it might be worth an additional conversation.
Love it. Love it. Now, for my external wholesaler brothers and sisters that are tuned in, you actually say that walkthroughs, which used to be the staple for every wirehouse, walkthroughs are actually becoming a negative thing. And then even lunch meetings. Lunch meetings have become lots of smiling, eating, and handing out business cards, but they're no longer the way that business gets done, or they can actually be detrimental. Am I reading that correctly, or is there something better than an external
Yeah,
wholesaler?
no, wholesalers, it's difficult. You want to get your foot in the door. You really, really do. I've been on many walkthroughs with wholesalers, and I just feel badly because, the advisors now have gotten into this mode where you walk through and they put their head down and, and they give you one of these. So it really is. You have to make sure that the lunch meetings, nice to do, but when I watched those lunch meetings, people were hungry. And that's about it. But it used to be the price of admission. And so in any business, things change and they need to evolve. So what's a lunch meeting now? A good lunch meeting now is if you really have a good relationship with the center of influence there, and you set up a lunch meeting with 3 to 5 people that he or she believes would have the most interest in your product. So you do pre-screening ahead of time. You get a couple of sandwiches in with a small group of people who are already interested, and suddenly you have a good meeting. Is it harder to do? Absolutely. Do people have an impression about who you are and what you're going to do based on the past? Yeah. So if you're an internal wholesaler calling, you got to do something really different to get the advisor to even listen to how you might want to do it differently.
Marianne, I appreciate your expertise, especially with the internal wholesalers. And I've worked with a dozen of my own internal wholesalers over my couple decade career. And the question I want to ask you is, what do you think? Is an internal wholesaler supposed to be a salesperson, or are they a part of the process to essentially do some scheduling and tee up their external wholesaler?
Ooh, a big question that I could go on for days, but I won't. I think it depends on the firm, but the trend now are that internal wholesalers are making about $100,000. And, I wish I had that when I was at their age, but you can't pay an admin, somebody $100,000 to do admin work. And that doesn't mean schedulers aren't important. The big deal about scheduling, I think, is that should be the time where you are setting the stage for what's going to happen in the meeting. You're finding out a lot to make sure that your time is well spent. If your internal wholesaler will do that for you from time to time scheduling, I think that makes sense. But to rely on your internal to do all of your scheduling you're going to have more canceled appointments than you want. So I'm just going to suggest that, because that is an easy thing to cancel a meeting where there's no next step, if that makes sense. So I think internal wholesalers should be salespeople. I think that the profile of a good internal wholesaler has changed. And I think that they need to primarily be very good at prospecting as that role changes. What I see firms doing is having a small pot of admins that actually do some of the ordering the pizza and the stuff like that if they're going to be doing it, but not the internals. because they can call more people and reach more people in a day from one place than an external can see.
What do you say to the firm that has decided to eliminate their internal sales desk completely?
Yeah. I would say you need to give those externals some help. That's what I would say. And I would say that, you only know what you know. And if you're an external and you've been very successful at it, there's a lot of stuff over the phone that you have to do now that was not part of your repertoire in the past. It didn't need to be. It was press the flesh. And so I would say you really need to look carefully externals, if you're going to take away the internal sales force, and look what data is supporting, where you go and how you find that. It's a loaded question that you gave me because it lends itself to some firms who are calling now their wholesalers all hybrids. So there's not an external or internal, there's somebody that does both. I really believe the size of the firm, what their strategy is, how well known they are in the marketplace, what their product lineup is, it really has to define what distribution strategy they use. But if your question was, and I'm not sure where it was coming from, and I'm a salesperson, I have to ask what's behind the question. And I'm not sure where it was coming from, but there are firms that are eliminating externals, just having internals. And I think such a quick strategy decision like that is not necessarily a smart one. And I think everything gets tangled up in the roles and the old names that used to be used for external, internal. And it really is, okay, how do we want to do business? How do we want to, what customers do we want to work with digitally? What ones do we want to work with over the phone, one-on-one web meetings, and face-to-face? Simple, all right? I make it sound, I know it's difficult.
Yeah, it is, and I've worked in firms where where I've had two internal wholesalers
Yes.
and an admin assistant, and then I've also worked for firms where I had me, myself, and I.
So which one did you prefer?
Well, I spent quite a bit of time in the Army, so I am green and flexible like Gumby. And I was able to try to adapt to both of them. On the one side, if I had two internal wholesalers, now I have oversight responsibility. And I have to try to play the telephone game where you have the can with the string, and I have to tell an internal what I want to have happen, and then they have to go do it. And a lot of times my message wasn't received or heard clearly. And then sometimes it's easier for me to get that next appointment scheduled. So there's some ambiguity in the answer. I will say that it is, it was much more of a, I guess, a survival mechanism when I was on my own to not waste one phone call. So there's a neither one work. I mean, they both work. So it's interesting. I wonder what you had thought about that. Another question in that line.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just, I was just, I think that it's interesting. One of the programs that I teach is it's called Power Partnerships. And in a way, people think they know how to partner, and how to partner in the past with an internal wholesaler was very different than it is now. And so you need to go back to process. Who does what to whom and when? So a lot of firms have sacred times during the day that, okay, the dog has just jumped up into my lap. Times during the day that wholesalers can't call unless it's an emergency, but you do little things like, if I text you, it's something that needs to be done right away. Otherwise, I will keep everything in one email that I will send to you at the end of the day. And the internal has what we call power hours that they, so there are very specific, I call it a partnership plan. that lays that out so that you know what they're doing and they know what you're doing. And if you don't lay it out, there's a lot of, let's just say, the mixed signals cause aggravation, and suddenly everything doesn't get done the way you want it to get done.
Yeah, indeed. Setting and managing those expectations is really key. You know, what I have noticed, and more so recently in the last few years, is much more than ever wholesaler turnover, both inside wholesalers and external wholesalers, changing companies coming into the business, leaving the business, adding wholesalers, reducing wholesalers. What is your take on that? And do you think that that's going to be the, call it the status quo for now, is that we're more like NBA players that can be free agents as opposed to 20 years ago when you stayed with one team your entire career?
Yeah, well, we're going through a period right now where the wholesaler force is being reduced across the board. Margins are tighter. This is an industry that has enjoyed 30% margins. And not like they're freaking out because now they're lower. But I say, as long as I've been in this business, I have seen the wax and the wane. When times are good, they hire more wholesalers, and when they're bad, they start reducing the wholesaling force. And I just think that that's bad news on a relationship side with the advisors, because advisors don't want to go through 3 or 4 internal wholesalers that they know. But I also think that the switching from one firm to another is now being looked at. Are your past results, are they pretty good hot product wherever you were in the past? And so there's a lot more scrutiny around how did you achieve your results. There's a lot more thought to what are the characteristics of a successful, in quotes, external wholesaler of the future. And the main criteria is you gotta always be learning. You gotta always be willing to up your game and do it differently. And heart goes out to wholesalers, because I think that there's you make a lot of money.
So welcome back. Had a little technical difficulties there, Marianne. Appreciate you sticking on. You're talking about just the difficulty, along with the high compensation, but the difficulty in having to be a wholesaler today. If I can, though, I want to just kind of ask you this question. You said before that, and according to McKinsey, that 60% of advisors are now working in teams, and that internals should sell very differently to analysts, to rainmakers, specialists, and to kingpins. Can you kind of shed some light as to what the different strategies should be that an internal wholesaler should use with those teams of advisors now?
Yeah, I think that a big part of the job now is really doing your homework before. And so that means you need to know an awful lot. Advisors expect you to know an awful lot about them. A lot of times if I'm in a training room, people go, well, isn't that like stalking if you tell them you know this? And I say, you know what? If I'm going to meet with somebody, I'm going to check them out on LinkedIn, and they expect me to do that ahead of time. So that's why I say to people, not to get off topic, but if your LinkedIn profile is awful, you know what? You've already shot yourself in both feet. So, but I think that advisors expect it. And so the simple answer to your question is a lot of it is, okay, if he's a rainmaker, then that's the kind of benefit language you need to use with that individual person because they're looking to bring in business. And so you want to use words like this is going to help you grow your practice versus an analyst, which is, what's important to that guy. It's important to him to look good and not to make a mistake. And so that's the kind of language that you want to use, saying, I know that it's important that you're going to have to go in front of the committee and you want to make sure that this doesn't blow up. And to the extent that I can make you comfortable with that, that's my job.
You mentioned being comfortable a couple of times, and isn't that counter to what we've been taught as salespeople, to find the pain? Which is it? Is it finding the comfort or finding the pain? Which one do you think?
I don't think there's always pain. I think that, what keeps you up at night? What a wholesaler that opens with a question that said, what gaps are there? What problems do you have? If you said that to me, I'd go, well, I had those psychological problems that we talked about before, but if you said it to me, I go, I don't have a problem. So all I'm saying is, I think your question is, if you can your job is to get the advisor to tell you what it is would be helpful, and in the kind of language that they're willing to use. And one of the things that is a key point that I say right now is that you have to make it okay for them not to buy right from the get-go. And you need to say that out loud, and you need to believe it, because people just don't want to be sold to now, to the extent that they are going to be so apprehensive. They don't want to make a mistake either. So that's where the comfort comes in. And if they're going to tell you I got problems or I got opportunities, let them do it either way, and then work with their language pattern.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So as a wholesaler, internal and external, we are building relationships with advisors, and the relationship has all of these intangibles or soft skills. But at the end of the day, the relationship really has to have the bedrock of that product that's there. I don't believe anyone would want to sell a product to their investors that they know is not a good product, let's say, at least, if not the best product. So as a wholesaler, internal or external, do you think that it's our job to find the best product in the marketplace and then represent that product or company? Or is it our job to position the company that we're with, their product, so that it appears to be the best?
I think advisors will know whether it's the best or not, ultimately. And in such a commoditized world, what is the best today is not going to be the best tomorrow. And so I worry if you tie yourself to a firm for product. Unless you're going to, a BlackRock or somebody that they got everything. And, they have their own problems. But I think that it really isn't. You want the advisor to believe that you're giving them good advice, as opposed to trying to make a buck and managing their expectations about what's going to happen, in a different environment. And again, at the end of the day, saying it's okay not to buy. Now, you have to sell something. I don't want to, you have to sell something. And so I think the piece that's difficult is once you've done all this, value adds and all that stuff, you need to say, we've been doing this for a little while, and I haven't seen any movement. I'm not sure why that is, but where is it on your near-term radar? So you need to begin asking the tougher questions that say, is this advisor just being nice to me because I've laid something out that I think will be helpful and it's not going anywhere? And so you have to know when to cut your losses and assess the urgency in buying.
That's the art of the business. There's an art and a science, right? That's the art, is knowing when, is what you're saying. Let me ask you this. Activity seems to be the cornerstone of our business.
Yeah.
Activity, activity, activity. Every sales manager carries around a club that says activity, activity, activity. What is your feeling about activity? And do you have a number in your head? Is it a number of outgoing calls, a number of talk tos? Is it, sun up to sundown? Are you a fan of Glenn Ross, always be closing? What is your feeling about this desire, or basically insatiable need for more activity?
It's an old school theory that the more you call, the more you'll sell. And I think what has changed now is the preparation piece and what information you need to have before you pick up the phone. And so smiling and dialing there's not a number that you can put on it. If you tell people to dial 50 times, they will. But so what firms are moving to, and what we use a lot of, is how do you measure quality versus quantity? I think external wholesalers have a terrible time because they're told how many meetings they should have a week. And they know for sure that having that number of meetings is not going to bring in the sales that they need, but they got to hit that number. And don't get me wrong, I think activity is important, but I think they need to redefine what quality is and have a combination. And you'll see good firms are able to see volume and quantity, and they're able to look at what is a good benchmark for quality calls. I'll just give you an example. For internal wholesalers right now, believe it or not, that have pretty good data and can get through to advisors, about 12 quality calls a day, meaning they connected with somebody and not that just the person said, hi, how you doing? Something happened on the phone, meaning there was something to move the relationship forward that happened. About 12 a day is a good number. And is that going to be a good number in the future? I don't know. As data gets better, they're going to be able to be calling more people and taking less time doing it. But as far as my big thing is the meetings for external wholesalers, I just think it gets so in the way of their success. You ask any good seasoned wholesaler, and he will tell you about how many meetings he needs to have to make his number. And so I just think the whole definition of the activity for activity's sake needs to change. And firms are so reluctant to measure quality because they think it's soft and iffy. And we've done it with a lot of firms, and it is amazing how it changes.
Yeah, I've been told before, hey, your target number is 16 meetings a week. And as soon as you hit that at a steady run rate, then your target number is going to be 17 meetings a week. The true statement too, by the way. I'm not just.
I believe it.
Hey, one thing that you did mention is kind of the evolving technology in the business, and even this integration of a thing called a hybrid wholesaler, which is kind of an evolution. What are your feelings about adding things like video meetings to the repertoire, and Skype, and kind of the new technology and how it's being used for internal and external sales?
It's a very big deal. The more progressive firms are pretty far down the line on it, although they do what is always amazing to me. They say, okay, I want you to do some one-on-one video meetings. Go ahead, see how that works. And there's a skill to it. And you know this probably better than anybody in terms of the work that you do. And there's a lot to making it come off as being professional that people don't necessarily understand until you're right in the middle of it. But advisors love it when it's done really well. Advisors actually are very wowed by it. And the very interesting thing, I think, now in wholesaling is the firms have access to technology that you can teach advisors to use, and then they can use it with their clients. And that's a huge value add. So things like, effective uses of LinkedIn, for example, are big topics for advisors. But yeah, the technology is big. The more savvy you can be, but firms need to train their guys on how to do it, because a bad first impression lasts for a very long time.
Do you think it's very far in the future that your Zoom meeting or your, let's call it, digital based wholesaler is actually artificial intelligence? Do you think that the robots are going to replace the actual human internal and external wholesaler?
I don't. Never totally. I think never totally. I think that there will be a smaller number of internals and externals. It depends on, and I think that's what's happening. But for those guys that embrace the technology, and especially the artificial intelligence about, what's the likely product, the next product for this particular advisor to buy, you have that. I sold door to door. If somebody could give me a list and say, go see these 10 people, they're likely to buy this, that, and the other thing, here's your information about them, I would have died and gone to heaven. It was like, yeah, just send me where to go. But that's never been the way wholesaling was done, so that there's a little reluctance to, I don't know whether that's going to work. Maybe I better go back to the guys I know. So that's what's changing. And I don't think artificial intelligence will replace it. I just think that people need to get that, just like your iPhone is outdated every 2 or 3 years, your approach with clients is outdated every 2 or 3 years. And if you can embrace that and say, yeah, I'm willing to stick with it, I think you can make a lot of money in this business, and I think you can have fun.
A lot of the wholesalers that I talk with now, both internals and externals, they have become, I believe, over studious. They are thinking entirely, I guess, too much. They're business planning, and I actually believe it's an avoidance behavior.
Yes.
Like, instead of just doing it. And one of your favorite quotes, maybe where where I think a lot of your charm came through, was this one: "Don't think too hard. It scares the fish." What are you talking about there? Tell us how we can actually just get over the thinking and get back to business. What should we be doing?
Well, I think that, one thing that people hide behind a bit is, and this when you talked about studios, this is what resonated with me. A lot of the guys out there have really advanced degrees. They have their CMAs, they have their CFPs, and the internal wholesalers do too. And the translate for them is, how do I impress this advisor with my deep knowledge of how to build portfolios and this and that. And in today's world, you need to dumb it down. And because advisors will nod their head when you're talking about something very technical, for the most part, I'm generalizing, but I think that, just to step back and dumb it down and say, you're a person, I'm a person. How do I make this as simple as possible to understand? And if you really use your sales skills, the advisor will tell you everything, and relax and just not have to have the smart comeback, because you're listening. And your whole job is to get the advisor to sell himself on what you're selling. So easier said than done.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Don't scare the fish. I love that.
You said it. I found it doing my research about you, and
you're amazing at this research. I'm waiting for the to drop.
Well, no worries. Don't worry. I want to take a moment now. We're coming up on our time, and I want to ask you the 2 signature questions that I ask all the guests. So have a little fun with this, but I'm interested in hearing your response. First question, Marianne, no wrong answer, by the way. First question is, if you could pick up the phone And on the other end of the phone is a 25-year-old Marianne, and you had 5 minutes with her, what advice would you give to your 25-year-old self?
Well, I tell her not to scare the fish. You set me up for that. It was a softball, and so that was good. But the best advice I ever got was to specialize. And I talked to this think tank person way, way back when I was kind of thinking about what to do. And what she said is, people look for specialists now in an area. And so don't think your niche is too narrow. And so I would say that. And I would say, don't be afraid of moving around to different places as well. I think people that are stay with one organization have a tougher time working with change. And so, and also sign up for something that you don't know how to do, and because usually nobody else knows how to do it either. And so if you can help define what your success is, meaning you go into a job and you don't know how to do it, sit down and define what you think success would be on the job and do it. You're going to be good to go.
That is
time at it too. I'm sorry.
What was that?
You have to have a sense of humor too, though, and you have to, it can't all be that serious.
That's a boatload of I guess of insight and very inspiring. Hopefully we would listen at 25. That seems to be the problem, is that 25-year-olds don't want to listen. Question number 2. This one's a little fun, and with your background, it's going to be very interesting to see what you say. Marianne, if you could have a legitimate superpower, which one would you choose, and what would you do with it?
I don't want my hearing back. I'll just mention that up front, because Lord knows, as soon as I sit down on a plane and just turning those hearing aids off, it's like it's an amazing gift to not be able to hear. I guess that I'd like to be able to see into the future a little bit. And everybody worries about the future and what's out there, but just to be able to see just a little further ahead, and so that you can, I guess, be better prepared about what's going to happen. And so I've tried to do that. I've guessed wrong in many cases about what it's going to be, and but being able to do that, I think, would be kind of cool.
Yeah, that's a dangerous one. I even carry around my own crystal ball here, but
well, I bring sometimes, I like to have fun in a lot of the classes that I do, and I bring on an 8-ball, and sometimes we'll say, is this going to be a good answer or not? And we'll flip that around. So we have fun at it.
That's priceless. That is priceless. Marianne, thanks again for being on the show today. Appreciate you and your positive demeanor, your charm, charisma, and your banter and wit are very refreshing. I'm sure that I can speak for all of your constituents that we all appreciate you and your work. We wish you much fortune and success both now and in the future. And as we say on the Awesome Wholesaler Experience, it's about the journey. And we do wish you well on yours. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Wholesalers, thanks for listening. And if you'd like to support the show, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and that little notifications bell too, so you'll never miss an episode. If you'd like to contact Marianne, she can be found all over the internet. Whether you need her for your next sales team meeting or even coaching, her company again is called Interactive Communications. You can direct message her there on LinkedIn, or even just let me know and I'll connect you as well. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in today. Thanks for supporting the show. And, of course, thanks for being awesome. Good night, everybody.